Hello friends, Jennifer Pearson here, Thistle Gypsy, and this is kind of further adventures with the Sacred Sites Tarot. So I'm kind of like, I can't say I feel bad, but I think this is a deck that's out of print. It was when I got it. Whether that has changed, I don't know. So I feel mildly bad about making a series on it, but I hope it will be interesting. But I am finding, and it's just a series of me getting familiar with the deck and trying to get into the cards in such a way that I will remember them. Yeah, it's kind of pre-getting to know the deck. It's like going through each one of these sites on the card and just getting a better understanding of them. I thought I might end up doing like only one per week, but I knocked off 4 this week, in part because it was difficult. So what I'm doing is, as opposed to doing a Google search and then doing, reading up on these things, I'm searching for and watching documentaries on YouTube, and some of them are very limited. And this first one, which is very hard to tell what it is, which is Mount Graham in Arizona, is very hard to find very much about it, at least in terms of the traditions of the Apache who hold it sacred, or why they hold it sacred, or if it's the center of the world, or exactly what is sacred about it. But mostly the videos that are available are about an observatory that was placed there and the objection of the Apaches to that facility on the mountain and a land trade that was going on. And there was another one that had to do with mining. That was the land trade to do mining in the mountains. And so it was mostly what I could find was about protests, and which is fine. Some Native American tribes don't care to put their traditions and beliefs out there very much, and that's their prerogative. So this card ends up kind of being, and I don't know if the artist in any way was honoring the regalia, the ceremonial or just dance regalia of the Apache specifically, or where they got the inspiration for that artwork. Somehow I suspect that dogs weren't a big, well, I don't know. I know the Indians had dogs, but anyway. So it seems to me that this stuck more with the Tarot Association than it did with the association, within the Religious Site Association. Let's just put it that way. And as I've gone into this, now granted, there is something of a challenge when you have 78 slots to fill, to get 78 sacred sites, so my hat is off to the people who did this. But some of them are kind of fanciful. For example, this depiction of somebody with, I assume they're supposed to be a bunch of wolves, and doing this ceremony with candles and whatnot here at Stonehenge. So when I tried to find out information about Stonehenge, I almost got more about what's Grange or Grange something. But the people who built the mounds. So the things, I got more information on stuff that is pre-Stonehenge, the stuff that led up to Stonehenge. And so that was all, it was very interesting. I hadn't kind of connected those pieces. And one of the things that's striking me about these various traditions, these old traditions, is how much a journey had to do with spirituality. And I just find that really interesting. You know, I've talked on this channel about the fact that I just am not a very ritual oriented person. I'm not, I have my habits, but they're more they're more habits because I'm tired and I need to conserve my energy, and they're my routines of the day. I'm not a ritual sort of person, but I can see objectively that having some sort of ritual, even if the ritual is just like a grounding ritual, a ritual to connect with the outdoors, with the land, whatever, that is not at all oriented toward a deity, or any sort of cosmological belief system or anything like that, would be probably healthy for me. And so it's been interesting to me to see the extent to which a journey or procession was such an important part, usually a communal procession, was a part of rituals. It would almost be like, you know, it's something that we've kind of lost. We have, I know the Catholic Church here, because it has such a large Hispanic, might even just be entirely Hispanic Catholic Church. They do a procession. I can't remember what it's for. I don't think it's Cinco de Mayo. I think it has something to do with Mary, and I can't remember what it is. Anyway, but again, it's very rare these days that is part of a ritual. So, and I bring it up here because it was mentioned in the documentaries that I watched. I just watched a couple of them, that there were multiple sites throughout the British Isles that it is believed were part of something of a pilgrimage that people would go on and visit each of them. And that there was, in ceremonies at Stonehenge, that they had to do with, that there was first a feast area, a separate stone circle area that they would presume, you know, they felt they were feasting there. And then again, there would be a procession. In fact, they would go down a river for a ways and then disembark and then come up to Stonehenge. And there was also an interesting note there that probably the primary purpose wasn't to mark the summer solstice, but the winter solstice, you know, marking when the sun starts to return. And I found that interesting as well. And some of the other, you know, the mounds, or I don't even know what they call them there, but, you know, that they are also oriented toward the solstices. So anyway, yeah, so just very interesting in the ancestor worship in the caves, and some really interesting things. So yeah, so we remain pretty Neolithic when we get here. So this is supposed to be Sybil's cave. I should see if the guidebook has anything to say. Let's look. I don't think it does particularly. You know, it's a little white book. So it says about the Fool, Mount Graham, Arizona, America. This place is sacred to Apache tradition. Here the shamans would go, and here it's like, you know, are they taking flight? Are they taking flight into something in which there is no actual truth, or just just a shade of the truth? Here the shamans would go to seek a connection with the spirits of the earth, capable of inspiring a vision of wisdom. And then for Stonehenge, England, a sacred place for Celtic Druids, but with roots dating back even further in time. Today it is a destination for pilgrims belonging to various new pagan religions. And it seems like when I was listening to the documentaries, that they were dating this kind of pre-Druid. So the Druids may have used it, but they weren't the makers of it. And watching a few documentaries doesn't make me an expert, so, but that's what I'm recalling. And this is Sybil's cave for the high priestess, and this is in Italy. According to legend, this was the entrance to the underworld kingdom of a fairy queen. Here, and that's like, really? A fairy queen? I didn't know they thought in those terms back then. Here, old age or pain did not exist, and the visitor could obtain arcane knowledge. So again, you know, I'm kind of wondering how inventive that is, that description there. And the only thing I could find really was, I don't think they call it Sybil's cave. Didn't they give a location in here? No. But there was a really interesting and the whole iguana thing is pretty fanciful. But there was an interesting talk about a cave system that was clearly used for ritual that had to do with, again, death and ancestors. It's a cave system in Italy. And so it's really interesting because it's practically like going back through the womb because there's this cave entrance that's scattered with crushed bones, and there's all kinds of theories about, you know, and these are bones that I don't know if they thought it was like 100 years that they had been accumulated there. So in order to go into the cave, you would be going over the bones of the ancestors. And so there was an open spot, I think they called it gallery anyway, that was, you know, modern day humans had to still crouch in, or I should say they would be bent over. They couldn't stand up straight. But then there's this long crawl on your belly to another small thing that looks like this. You know, so it's kind of deep in there. But they don't know who was there. It's not Sybil's cave particularly. That's not what it's called. They don't know, but there's a pool in the center and some of the stalactites had been kind of shaved off or ground down so that something could be put. And there were, when it was rediscovered, there was pottery there to collect the water dripping. So it was just, so again, I feel like this is hearkening back to something like that, and then putting her in there with an iguana. But you know, the Venus of Willendorf, or that sort of a figure up there. But where Sybil's, it isn't a cave. It's a thing that you would go to. It's a building, you know, built, it looked like into the earth. So you would go down this stone hallway, and then you come to the end where there are chambers. Yeah. So again, this is a bit of a, there's a lot of departure from anything factual in this deck. Not entirely, but in a lot of the cards. And here's another one. And I suspected, given the sheer clothing in the bare butts, that this would be a card that departed a lot from the actual. So this is Demeter. And so this is supposed to be about the Eleusis, how do they say it? Eleusis. And I listened to this really interesting talk about the Eleusinian mysteries. I know I'm not going to say it right, but hey, I haven't studied Greek. And that it was, again, there was the procession. And again, like with her, there isn't a procession, there isn't a journey. The cave I just talked about constituted a journey, you know, with that long belly crawl. But the built structure was a long haul. So there is kind of a dramatic delay between entering and reaching. You know, it's not like opening the door to your living room or something like that, you know, or even a short entryway or something. You know, there's the long walk for your audience, to go have your audience with the oracle. And here they're, what did they say, 30 kilometers between the starting place and the ending place. And so this is where you would go to be initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries. So this is the sanctuary of Demeter, is what they're calling it. In ancient Greece, this was the site dedicated to the celebration of the Eleusinian mysteries, age-old religious rites. And they were old age. And they seem very related to even, you know, the old underground, under earth mysteries. Because, for one thing, chances are women weren't allowed. Even though this is a goddess, I didn't hear any female names being mentioned. And they did talk about hierophants, that there was a certain, I don't know if it was a family or class of hierophants, that the final kind of initiation stuff was performed by somebody who always came from a certain class or family and were male, you know. And so it was a procession at night that stopped at other places, you know, and there were parts of the well, not the actual initiation, but there were stages to the journey. And then you came to the temple, and what they were saying is that, you know, that the rite that happened there were to relieve you of your fear of death. So even though what we see here is Demeter, or I assume that's supposed to be Demeter, if we had just one of the girls, it would be more accurate, because it is actually about the relationship between Demeter and Persephone, and it really focuses on Persephone and her descent into the underworld and her return. So, right, you know, part of the complex of, they're not really temples, of buildings that, you know, that the initiates went to, you know, one of them was dedicated to Pluto, you know, Hades. And so, you know, that's kind of, that's the focus, is you go there to be relieved of your fear of death. And so some of the things that happened in there, they believe, were to imitate death, to sort of give you that fear of death. I guess they would hold torches near you so you would feel the heat, and you were supposed to be blinded. It was supposed to be dark. It didn't sound as scary as other things, like, you know, you hear about, I don't know if it was rites somewhere where you are ritually buried, you know, and that sort of thing. Sounds creepier. In any case, this was the ceremony that they would go through. It wasn't, as the person was saying, it wasn't a departing of secret knowledge. It was just sort of initiating you into an experience that was supposed to relieve you of your fear of death. And after, you know, that some of that provocation, you know, the fearful aspect, they would drink a hallucinogenic potion. And so whatever any one person, so in many ways it kind of reminds me of the sweat lodge even, in terms of a purification, because the people were supposed to fast for 3 days before they do the march, the procession. They were supposed to bathe in the ocean, as, again, purification. And more gruesomely, they were supposed to kill a piglet. And I don't know if they were supposed to anoint themselves with the blood of it, but it was believed back then that the blood of pigs drew out evil. So it's like you're trying to go in there pure, and then you're given sort of an extreme experience that includes, again, that the heat there. And now, you know, to my knowledge, the usual sweat lodge did not involve any hallucinogens. It was the extreme heat of the steam and things like that might give people visions or putting themselves, or if they were to drum or something, they may have had something. But in this case, kind of the end of the ceremony was to take a hallucinogen. And so that so you had the physical experience, and then the final thing, especially on an empty stomach, would give you your own personal vision or experience of the other world. So, the people of, is it Peru, where people talk about the ayahuasca, taking of the ayahuasca, the shamanic traditions, that would be, they're thinking of it as Pluto in the underworld. But it sounds very much like what other traditions would think of as, in the shamanic traditions, they do call it the lower world. So all very interesting. And that's as far as I made it this week. And I have to say that not much of it has really added to how I would interpret the cards. But it's interesting to me that these first three are so closely related to underworld, even though Stonehenge is above. Initially, it's in a lineage that's very earth-centered, as in the earth, and ancestor worship centered, just sort of coming out of that phase, maybe. And these are pretty deeply rooted in the underground, even though, of course, Demeter is, she's the empress because she is about wheat and agriculture and the productive seasons of the year. All right, so I just thought I'd share that. I think it's one of those things where, if you share something, maybe it'll stick. It certainly made me aware of how much I'd already forgotten over the course of, not even a full day for some of it. But anyway, I will have to see whether I'll always share this stuff. I might. Again, selfishly, just because it will help solidify things in my mind. But I think along the way, I'm going to learn that much as I like the idea of the sacred sites being in here, that they're only going to, that they make engaging, interesting images, but they're only going to peripherally add to the meaning of a given card. In other words, to be a little rude about it, it's kind of a gimmick. It's, applied to the cards, but not necessarily adding or altering the traditional meaning all of that much. At least that's what I suspect. Which is not necessarily bad. I still like it. And in fact, if anything, it starts to relieve me of the thought that I have to know a lot in order to use this deck. Like I have to know everything about the various sites here. I think it's an interesting intellectual journey to go on, but I suspect that when I get to the end of it, it'll be like, all right, well, that was fun and interesting, discoveries, some of them going back to things I'd heard of before. But I really don't need to know it in order to just use this deck to read with. All right, everybody. Take care, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.